Welcome. I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Alex Peace. Hi, Alex.
Hi.
Hi. I have known Alex for many, shall I say, years online, and eventually we met face to face a few times now. She has been one of my inspirations over the years. She has 3 adult children, and I'm so excited that she agreed to come on the podcast to talk about her family's unschooling experiences. So to get us started, Alex, can you share with us a bit about you and your family and what your kids are up to nowadays?
Sure. I have daughters, and they are 26, 24, and almost 22. And my oldest daughter is doing a master's in community development at the moment. She got her undergrad in biology, and so now she's looking at the social license of tidal energy. So that's pretty fun, pretty interesting. My middle daughter traveled a lot and farmed for quite a number of years, and now she's settled into second-year university at doing an undergrad science degree in sustainable agriculture, and that's lots of fun. She wants to be a farmer. Thank goodness, somebody to feed us. And my youngest daughter is a dancer. And she has been in school, took this past year off, thinking about going back to school, getting some work as a dancer. And she's heading off to Mexico in a week for some Spanish lessons, downtime, time to explore herself in Mexico. And so I get to go and visit her. I love it, having kids that travel and who still want me to travel with them. So that's lots of fun. Peter is still working full time, playing lots of music. I actually don't even know how many bands he's a part of anymore. This holiday, he built a still for one of the girls because of not for alcohol, for essential oils. So he's having lots of fun with that kinds of thing. And sailing in the summer, I am working lots.
Having fun doing that?
And that's, I think, having fun doing that. Yeah. And that's about it, I guess. They were all, everybody was home over the holidays. Caitlin lives in town, so she doesn't come and stay for extended periods. But usually over the holidays, she does come for a few days so that she can hang out in the early mornings and late nights as well. So, and everybody's in the house at the moment. So, and there's an extra dog. So yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier we're at 3 dogs right now too, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah. I have 2 dogs, and my daughter has a dog that she brings home when she comes, and I also get to puppy sit him every third weekend. So that's lots of fun. So my dogs are sort of learning how to be young again, and not entirely sure if they're thrilled with the process.
All right. So can you tell us how you discovered unschooling and what your family's move to unschooling looked like?
Well, I guess my earliest exposure to the idea was at La Leche League so many years ago, 26 years ago. There were people in a group, and I think for most people, La Leche League, you go for 4 or 5 times, sort of a series of I went for 5 years. Like, I don't know why, but it became, and I didn't even have any trouble breastfeeding. But it became, it also became a support group, and there were people there who were homeschooling. So I was exposed pretty early in my kids' lives to the idea, and it wasn't really hard for me to think about. It was, I was thrilled to see that there were options. I didn't have a particularly good time at school myself. So when I realized, there's options for my kids, I'm not going to have to do this, send them off to school. I was pretty interested. But when it came time for, sort of when Caitlin was, I don't know, maybe 4 or something, and people were starting to talk about school for her, Peter and I did a lot of research into what was available in the area. We researched Montessori and Waldorf and that kind of thing. And we read and read and read. And in the end, we decided to give homeschooling a try. I don't remember when the separate concept of unschooling came up to us. Probably once we decided, had did the research at around when Caitlin was 3 or 4, it would have arisen. And then once we decided to do it, I was on all those lists, and I was writing this down, and I couldn't remember what was that original list that Sandra and Anne and Joyce and you and Amy, and there's it was before Shine, and I can't remember the name of the list. Anyway,
well,
there was a big
the board, the unschooling.com forum.
That was it, but there was another one before that even.
Ooh. See, that was
I don't remember
my time even, because my oldest is 26 too, but he was in school for a while before I discovered unschooling. So you found it even earlier.
And I remember do you remember the conference in Peabody, Massachusetts? Did you go to that one?
Yes, that was a Live and Learn.
Live and Learn, yeah. And anyway, so we read, so much. We read John Holt and all the information we could get about learning about homeschooling, about unschooling. And then, of course, once Anne started Shine with Unschooling, we were there right from the beginning. Went to conferences, came to your conferences, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I guess that's how we got in there.
Never went to school. You guys just kind of just kept going when they all hit school age. Is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, they all. Caitlin did end up going to school midway through high school. Mm-hmm. So she went for halfway through grade 11 and grade 12. So she got a year and a half of high school. And Adrian went halfway through grade 10. But because Caitlin had went at that stage, she didn't have enough credits to graduate, but she got all the courses that she wanted to get into, the program she wanted to get into. So even though she didn't graduate, she went straight on to university into science. When Adrian went, it was really I still can't actually believe this. It was quite amazing. They said, "Oh, well, do you want to graduate or do you want to do this Caitlin style?" And Adrian was like, "Yeah, I don't care about graduating." So that whole apparatus that normally comes down that says, you must take X number of Englishes and maths and you must do all of this stuff, it simply wasn't there. She went and took her first semester in grade 10. She took grade 12 food science, grade 11 oceans, grade 11 art, grade 11 drama. She basically took whatever she wanted. Yeah. So in the end, she did end up graduating because somewhere along the way she decided she did want some basic English and math, and by the time she finished doing that, she had all the courses. Nicole, and she graduated and then promptly didn't go to school then for another 5 years or something. She traveled and worked and traveled and worked and traveled. So she's traveled all over the world. And then Nicole was dancing early, and by the time she might have thought like the other girls did, oh, do I want to go? She would have had to give up a lot. She was already driving into Halifax, 4 times a week and coming home at 11 or 12 at night after classes. So she would have really had to give up a lot to go to school, and it just
didn't fit.
Didn't fit. Yeah. So yeah. And then, so her first day of school was at university.
That's always an adventure.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I love how unique it was for each one of them, right? It was just them pursuing what they were interested in, what they wanted to do, what they wanted to try out, what they wanted to play around with, and just making it work for them however they wanted. I love that. That was beautiful.
I really, that's one of the things I love about my kids. They're unique amongst they're really quite different, the three of them, and they all follow their own path really distinctly, and yet they're all really close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's something that I've noticed as well, right? That's just when they can pursue, what they're interested in, and they're supported and encouraged. It's amazing how different they all are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But again,
Exactly.
they're also connected,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. Okay. So what did you find to be the most challenging aspect of deschooling those first few years as you moved into it? Anything?
Well, I honestly, we did, neither of us, I mean, certainly the kids didn't have to deschool because they weren't in school or in daycare or in any of that sort of institutionalized kind of setting. And Peter and I didn't really have to do an awful lot because, well, certainly I like I said, I didn't particularly have a good time at school, so I was thrilled that there was options. I think probably, I don't think it was a huge challenge, but I think there were bits, like I think at the beginning we sort of did, we might have flirted with workbooks, and we flirted with unit studies and, that kind of stuff. And we didn't. We stopped,
And they
So
didn't fit.
didn't fit. Yeah. So, but it wasn't really hard. And also, it was kind of funny. We live in an area. We live in rural Nova Scotia, but it's really quite well supported. When my kids were young, and we'd be in a lineup at the grocery store, and somebody would say, "Oh, no school today," and I'd say, "Oh no, we homeschool." 9 times out of 10, people would say, "Oh yeah, my cousin does that. Oh yeah, my neighbor does that." So, it wasn't really, it wasn't hard to do in our area.
Oh, that's really, really cool. Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was one of the reasons why I had never even heard of it until they were, certainly my eldest two were full time in school. Yeah, and when I mentioned it, that our whole community, everybody that I knew, family, friends, everyone, and in the area, thought it was illegal.
Yeah.
Because what do you mean you can do that? So I love that. That's great. So what about
Yeah.
your husband's journey? Was this kind of you said it wasn't such a big deal. He's a university professor, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
But I think school had not worked out all that well for him in the early years, primary and secondary. So again, when we discovered it, it was like, oh, great, we have options. Let's try it and see. And once I found anyway that once you see the kids, if you're really paying attention to the kids and you see them learning, it's so exciting. You think, give this up? Really? Do we have to? So I think it was. I think it was easy for Peter to and I would do an incredible amount of research, and I would talk to Peter about it, and which was slightly annoying because when sort of things were not going particularly well, and I'm in the middle of trying to figure out, and he would sort of bring back one of these things that I had read, and he'd say, "Now what about this?" And I'm like, "Really now?" So he was always very good. He was in pretty early on.
Oh, that's very cool. And I think that is, for me, that was a huge piece that you mentioned, paying attention to the kids and seeing it in action, because I think for a lot of people that is the big piece, right? Is realizing all the learning that happens that doesn't look like school.
Yeah.
Right. When we think that's what learning's going to look like, and we go, oh, hey, we have options. And then you pay attention and you look, and then you see it everywhere, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So next question, when it comes to unschooling, trust plays a really big role. That's usually kind of the next step, right? As you're looking for the learning, because that's the important piece, because that's what you think you're replacing because you're not going to school. And then you get comfortable with that piece, and then trust becomes a much bigger thing in your lives as you dive deeper. So I was wondering how you develop that deeper level of trust with your children.
Well, I think this was one of the questions I was stymied by, because really it's just part of developing a relationship with them as people. It's not a separate thing, it's just part of developing the relationship, and talking and listening and thinking and facilitating and just being with your kids,
Yeah. It's like, like you said, that trust comes because your children, right? Even as they're all different, as they're completely individual. But when you're actually in it comes, I think when your relationship becomes two people versus parent-child, when you move from that control adult-child relationship to that connected person-to-person of different ages relationship, you do get to know each other so well. And then so much of what they do isn't a surprise anymore. It isn't completely unexpected where you have to worry about, I need to trust this because I completely don't understand it. And then, and then when you start relying on that, sometimes the tendency is to step back, right? And then you're even less connected. And then it spirals into a bigger and bigger deal, right? And in fact, I always found when I had those more freak out moments, like you were talking about earlier, it was because I was less connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that when, I don't know why, but when things aren't working out, often you step back. Like, it's like, oh, this is unpleasant. I'm going away from this.
Yeah.
And my experience was always, no, I have to go in. I have to spend more time. And I have to find ways to spend time in unthreatening ways. Like, not like, okay, I'm coming into your life now, but like, hey, let's go for lunch, or, hey, let's go to the beach. And just to spend more time, even though it's uncomfortable, because then that takes you back to that place of, okay, we can talk about this, let's figure it out together kind of place.
That is such a great point, because if there's this one thing over here that you're really uncomfortable with and you don't quite understand yet, you're right, you want to get closer, you want to remember to lean into it, but you don't have to jump into that mess right there. Right? Because you're still that deer in the headlights, coming at it sideways by, focusing on the things that you enjoy doing together, sitting, watching movies, going to movies, going out to lunch, just getting back into all those good pieces increases your connection. And then it's so amazing though, isn't it? This jumble over here, a little thread shows up and you're like, oh, that makes a little bit more sense. Like, sometimes you never have to actually talk about this, do you? Right? Because it comes to make sense to you.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Just because you connected. Like, it's not that you don't want to understand it. It's not that you ignore it. That's not what I meant. I meant that I have all the revelations and I come to understand it by having, hung out with them here, and all those little pieces just naturally come up, rather than saying we need to confront this and we need to figure this out. Right? Yeah.
I do tend to need the discussion, but I guess I'm not as good at the insights just coming to me. I do tend to need the discussion, but definitely not in any. But the discussion has to come later when your connection is back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You have to make the connection stronger again before you tackle anything that's tricky.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a good point. It's not that, like I said, it's not that you ignore it, but it comes up in different ways rather than always needing to jump into it head on. Okay, so that leads nicely to the next question. Was there a time when one of your kids' interests really stretched your comfort zone? And I was wondering how you moved through that.
Well, I don't know. This is what came up for me. It's not exactly an interest, but
Mm-hmm.
a couple of my kids read very late. And so it was something that really stretched me as an
Mm-hmm.
unschooling parent. For a while, I sort of did a lot of reading about, reading difficulties, particularly online, hearing other parents' anecdotes. And then at some point, there were two things happened.
Mm-hmm.
One was that I was flipping through a book about dyslexia or something, and it was an academic book. It was, studies of various things, and I sort of went straight to the, what's the biggest problem? And it said, the biggest problem is how people feel about their reading issues. It can become an emotional problem. And I was like, right, so, okay, we don't have to go there. That's easy. That's under control. And the second thing that happened is at one point I said to one of my kids something like, it doesn't look like you're learning to read like I learned how to read, but I'm sure there's lots of other people that are learning to read how you do. Do you want me to ask, some of the folk online and get you some hints? And she said, no, it'll be fine. I'll figure it out when I need to. And I went, right. Okay, then. So I then pretty purposefully did not look any further into reading difficulties. I worked really hard at creating an atmosphere of, well, this is the way it is, and you need me to read to you, so that's the way it is. We're going to read to you. We're going to read for you. And maintaining that this is just
Your way.
normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was kind of cute. Like if we were out with a big group of homeschooling kids and everybody just read out loud. Like any of the things, it just wasn't a big deal in our group. But I did have to kind of really, there was some issue with some family members.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just really set up some boundaries, like, okay. And I what I felt like was I kept the world at bay until they learned to read on their own. And so that was, I think, yeah, that was one of the things that I felt good about.
Buffer. You kept that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Buffer's probably the best word for it, right? You kept them
Yeah.
in situations where it wasn't a big deal and where it would have been a big deal. Like back to that research where the emotional piece is like the hardest piece. Feeling bad about yourself.
Yeah.
So that's what you took that and focused on that and just didn't go into those situations, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And the byproduct of it was that I got to read to my kids for years, which is fabulous. So we read a lot of books out loud. So that was fun.
That's awesome. What surprised you most about how unschooling unfolded in your lives?
Well, I think two things. One is how bonded my kids became. And I think it surprised me because I don't have great family relationships. So when my kids were born, I was like, I really want my kids to be close. And I was like kind of trying to make it happen, and it really wasn't happening. It so wasn't happening. And so eventually I learned, I'm slow, but I did learn that really it's none of my business. What my baggage about my relationships has nothing to do with my kids. And my kids are, I just had to leave them be and let them have their own relationships. And so I didn't have high expectations on what would happen because A, I'd mucked about, and B, then, who knows what was going to happen. Like I said, I didn't have good experiences myself. So when they did eventually become very close, I was A, surprised, and B, thrilled that they had come to it on their own.
Yeah,
I
no.
wasn't surprised they'd come to it. I was thrilled they'd come to it on their own.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That was something that was a big revelation for me too, actually, because I ended up writing a talk about that, and I called it a family of individuals. Because at first you want, you have this dream of this close knit family and everything,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so you try to pursue that. But when you try to put that on other people, you're actually making it all worse.
Worse, much worse, much worse. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I ended up like you did, it's like, okay, that's my dream. Those are my thoughts. And
Yeah.
I'm putting all those expectations out there, and you can see the negative reactions. Then when I, stepped away from that and just started treating them as the individuals they are, the different individuals they are, then all of a sudden, yeah, it wasn't about them against each other or having to push against or anything. Like everybody was getting all the support and the attention that they wanted. Right. I remember you had edited that or something at that point when I said, sometimes one wants more money, some needs more money to pursue their interests. And sometimes, they want more of your time. So it's differing things that you're doing for each child, but it's all fair because it's meeting their needs. Right. So for each one of them, it's meeting their needs. I remember. And then I think I replied at one point, what if it's one child who needs all those things at once or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And that's totally good too.
It is. It's the way it is. So the other thing that was surprising for me was how much fun it was, and what it did for me. I mean, when I was growing up, I lived in a house that I had older parents, and all my brothers and sisters were gone, so I sort of lived by without siblings much, and my parents were British, so quite well, it was a certain lifestyle, and so when I don't even remember having crayons. You know what I mean? Like I'm maybe I did, but so with my kids, I bought art supplies, and I got to do all the fun art things as well, and taking them to museums and art galleries and beaches and traveling with them and experimenting with them and reading to them and dancing with them. Like those were all new experiences for me. So it was so much fun. And I found that that's pretty amazing. I didn't go in it for the fun, but boy, it was fun.
Oh, I love that piece. I love that piece because it's so true, right? We get to, I remember that first year, it was a lot of releasing, my view of what an adult should do and how an adult should act, and realize I can just be a person and I can actually sit on the floor and play with them and have fun with it, right? And bring in all sorts of things that I think would be fun, right?
Yeah.
Whether they join me or not, we're all side by side playing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so as your children got older and needed less of your hands-on involvement, you began a career as an editor. And in fact, you have edited all my books, and it has been a wonderful experience working with you. So I was very curious how that interest developed, and how I thought we'd talk about how we wove that into our unschooling days when we first started working together.
I know. I was thinking about that, and oh my God, that was amazing. So it started. I guess I was looking at, when my youngest started to be a teenager, and I could sort of start to see, all right, there's going to come a time where. So I wanted something that paid. I wanted something that I liked. I wanted something that I could do from home, because I couldn't imagine, after living in the country for 18 years, working in an office that was gray and no windows. Yeah. So I wanted to work from home, but I also, because Peter can travel sometimes, I wanted it to be portable. So I had all these kind of criteria. I don't know if I was able to delineate them, but they were definitely floating around in there. Yep. And then I was at a knitting group, and And a friend at Knitting Group said something about being an editor. And I was like, what? You've got a math degree. How can you be an editor? And she's like, you go take courses. What's the matter with you? And I was like, oh, and my brain just exploded, because I guess I'd always loved words, but I always thought you had to have a PhD in English, and I'd never taken an English course, So I was like, what? So I ran home, looked at the editing courses, and I don't know if anybody would understand how much joy there was in my life when I could see that I could take a grammar course. It was like, oh, wow. So anyway, so I started, so I looked at, there's lots of online courses. So I started taking courses at Ryerson online. There's a post undergrad certificate. So you have to have an undergrad degree, and then you can do a publishing certificate. And there's I think you have to take 8 courses or something, and then and there's 2 that you have to take, and then you can take a bunch of electives. And the 2 that you have to take looked a bit boring. They were kind of survey, publishing in Canada. Like, yeah, whatever. So I dived right into copy editing. I thought, well, I want to see. Maybe it's not for me, So I'm taking copy editing right away, and then I'll know. And if I have to take the boring survey courses, I will later. So I took the copy editing course, but we were still pretty involved in the unschooling community. And so I remember you were like, yeah, so I'm writing a book. And I was like, wow. So I remember writing to you and saying, hey, you're writing a book. I just finished. Do you need an editor? I just finished a course. And you're like, yeah, sure. It was so fun. Like, it was just like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, let's figure this out together, basically.
Let's figure this out together. Yeah. And it was so fantastic. I cannot tell you how amazing that was for me. It really started me off. I'd taken the copy editing course, and you gave me the experience, right? Then I could start when other jobs came up, I could say, yes, I am a copy editor, as opposed to have just taken a course. So, so I took copy editing course, and then I continued on and took proofreading, indexing, structural editing, children's editing.
Did you take those 2 boring courses eventually?
In the end, I took. I had everything. So I just kept taking the course and thinking, well, I don't even know if I need
the certificate,
but. Yeah, I'll just keep taking. So I finished all of the courses, and all I had to do was the 2 boring courses. And I thought, wow, what the hell? So I took them, and I so didn't enjoy them.
Oh.
I was right. I did not enjoy them. One was on the education publishing section of Canada, and let me tell you, that class got an earful. I had a lot to say about editing textbooks and how the education sector works. I had a lot to say. I remember one time I was at a conference and trying to do a paper for the course, and my roommate at the conference, I was like, what? No, this is so wrong. I was yelling at the computer as I was finishing my paper. Anyway, I did do that course. And then I did this sort of general publishing in it was okay, whatever. I got the certificate. I don't know if the certificate's done anything for me, because I just got more and more work as I was going along, and I'm now working full time as an editor, proofreader, indexer. Indexing has really taken off. I do more indexing than editing now. Although I was looking at my stats this year, it was about 60-40 for indexing to editing, but the year before it was actually more. It was like 65-35. So I did more editing this year. But I do a bit of proofreading. I like it, but it doesn't come my way as often. I do a little bit of fact checking, and it's a blast. Yeah. It is so much fun, because essentially, I love learning, really, what it comes down to. So I'm learning the content of the books that I read. I'm learning the software that I use, how to be efficient. I'm learning how to be a small business owner. I'm learning all the, I'm just kind of learning all the time. So it's Always learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Learning how to be better at my craft, taking professional development courses and webinars and things. So I'm kind of learning all the time. It's lots of fun.
So amazing. It's been so fun to watch you. And I wanted to just mention to people like that first book that we did, because
oh yeah,
because we like our youngest were both in their teens and stuff, but we were still like full on unschooling with our kids, right? And you gotta this is free to learn that we're talking about, and it's not a long book. It's very meaty, I will say. There isn't a wasted word in there, I don't think.
No, but it took us forever, didn't it?
But exactly, that's what I wanted to let people know, because that's one of the things I love working with unschooling parents, and I do it with transcribing the podcasts, etc. But our families were always the number one thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You would send something in, and I would say, "Sorry, we've got something coming
Whatever.
up. I won't be able to work on it, for a while." Yeah. And you were like, "Sure."
Yeah, and sometimes it would be like a month or two, right? I mean, that's why it took like a year to do.
Yeah, I can't tell you how grateful I am. I am forever grateful. I will forever be grateful to you for that experience. And it was quite funny, actually, because at some point, you talk to lots of editors, and so I was in a group somewhere, and somebody said, "Oh my God, wouldn't it be lovely to have a dream client? Somebody who lets you take as long as you need, somebody who pays you right away, somebody who answers all your queries that you put in and questions." And I was like, tick, tick, tick. In fact, I do have the dream client. and you were my first. It was so funny. I was just like, oh my God, they're not all like Pam?
I thought this is how it goes.
I thought this is how it goes. Yeah, exactly. Oh
yeah,
my
no,
gosh.
that was spectacular. It was just so lovely to have, like, it was really important to me that you were an unschooling mom, because then, the feedback that I was getting, not only was it, fixing all my grammar, but it was great questions. Like, I'm not sure what you're saying. I don't think you're getting your point across here. You want to add something to this, or this is getting repetitive, or whatever. You could also add value that way. So it was for me too, an amazing experience on my side. So thank you. Okay. Question 9 of our 10 questions. Ooh, and I think we might have touched on this, but let's dive in, see if you've got more to add. Now that your children are all young adults, in what ways are your relationships the same, and in what ways are they different?
Well, that's another hard question. They're relationships, right? So they change and develop all the time.
All the time.
The ebb and flow as to how the relationship goes. It changes with each person. It changes with different circumstances. I couldn't answer. I couldn't sort of encapsulate that really. One of the things that I really, love is when my kids started traveling. That was a big bonus for me, and said, "Why don't you come, Mom?" And I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, you've traveled to some places over the years, haven't you?
Yeah. I think the thing, and I don't know if you're experiencing this, and it's going to sound sad, but it's not really, is that, when they're really little, you're doing most of the leading. And, as things change, it becomes much more equal. They're saying, "I want to learn about this," and you're following them, and it's back and forth. And then you say, "Oh, what about this?" And they say, "Oh, sure." And, there's sort of a back and forth. But I find these days, I think I'm starting into the third phase where, well, then there was where they're leading all the time. But I think now I'm into the phase where, and I don't know how to say this without it being negative, but it's really just the way it is that they're not leading me. They're off. Do you know what I mean? Like mm, the phrase that I'm looking for, and you can edit this out if it doesn't fit what you want, but the phrase that comes to me is that I'm being left behind. And that sounds negative, but I think it just really means that, you know, that, that the relationship is different again. And that it's not that they don't really need me to be even as much apart, right? They're
There are
letting
parts
me
of their
know.
lives now that we don't know a lot about, and we don't.
They let me.
That's it.
And we don't need to. That's right. It's not like they're saying, "I want to do this. Help me do this." They're saying,
"I did
Gee,
this,
Mom, I'm letting you know." Yeah, just so you know. And so it's more like, So I guess I can see that coming more and more and more.
Yeah, no. Yeah. And you're right. It's absolutely not a negative thing. It's, it's still dancing with them, the relationship, the back and forth, and everything. But yeah, we're both stumbling on it. We're not, needed as much, but it's just a natural progression of the relationship and them just being more and more centered in themselves, and us being, even two of my kids still live here, but I still see that it's not even, I think it's a part of growing up and being adults and everything, and being adulting their own lives, right? Doesn't matter literally where they're living or anything. That's just another transition. And it doesn't mean you're not close, and it doesn't mean you're not connected. It's just a different way, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, no, see, you had a really good answer to that question. Okay, looking back, what for you has been the most valuable outcome from choosing unschooling?
Outcome. Well, I missed that word.
Or most valuable thing.
Well, the most valuable thing.
On outcome.
All right. The most valuable thing, I think, in retrospect, everybody, when you first start, you're thinking about the schooling part of it. And gradually you abandon that. And then you just abandon thinking about what you're doing and you just do it. But I think that for me, looking back, the thing that was the greatest was time. The kids had time to sleep in. They had time to make their own meals if they wanted. They had time to make decisions, even if it took us 5 hours and a family meeting and several bouts of tears. We had the time.
Yeah.
We had the time to negotiate who was going to do what and how. We had the time to go to the beach or not go to the beach. They had time to develop relationships with me, with each other. And from that time, to do all of those things, everything else came. They had time to learn. They had time to be who they were, and not wait to become who they are. But, they had time to do that all along. I think
be themselves every moment, right?
Every moment, to make mistakes, to have dreaming time. I've got a kid who needs like oodles of dreaming time, and time for that.
Oh, that's spectacular. Thank you so much, Alex. That was that. I love that piece, because that's the essence of it, isn't it? Right? Time to live.
Yeah.
Free to live, just be ourselves and discover and discover how we connect with the people in our lives, right?
Yeah.
And how we can be in relationship with the people in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. It was so fun.
Yeah. It's always great to talk to you. Always, always, always.
Always. And before we go, where's the best place for people to connect with you online? Give out your website.
Yes, my website is alexandrapeace.com. You can go and look there. I will now promptly have to go and update it.
Nobody will know.
I haven't put many of my latest projects up there, but I'll do so as soon as I can. But yeah, I have a website. I'm an editor. I'm a proofreader. I'm an indexer. I edit nonfiction. I don't edit fiction, although I sometimes proofread fiction. Yeah, thanks for asking. Thank you very much for asking.
Thank you so much for saying yes. It was so much fun. Have a great day, Alex. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.